Welcome to Echoes from the Heart, the weekly homily podcast from Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish in Wayne, New Jersey. Each episode offers a moment of reflection, a word of hope, and a chance to let the gospel speak to your life. Thank you for praying with us today. One of the most defining traits of the human person is the desire to search. Long before we learn how to speak in full sentences, we begin with a single word that shapes our lives. Why? Why is the sky blue? Why does the moon follow us at night? Why do people suffer? Why do we love? Why are we here? This impulse to ask, to seek, to wonder is not a flaw in our design. It is part of who we are. We are created with minds that stretch beyond what we can immediately see or grasp. We are, by nature, seekers. And that is precisely why today's gospel speaks to us so powerfully. The Magi were seekers. They were not kings. They were not members of the chosen people. They were scholars, observers of the heavens, students of patterns and signs. They lived at the intersection of science, philosophy, and mystery. They studied what could be measured, but they also trusted what could not. Something in the sky disturbed their routines. A star appeared, not simply as a beautiful phenomenon, but as a summons. And instead of dismissing it, instead of explaining it away, they allowed it to question them. That is the first act of faith, allowing ourselves to be unsettled. The Magi did not know where the journey would end. They did not know whom they would find. They did not know how long the road would be or what the cost would be. They only knew that something greater than themselves was calling them forward, and so they went. Faith, at its core, is not about having answers. Faith is about movement. It is about choosing to follow a light even when the destination remains unclear. Notice how human this story is. The Magi do not get everything right. They stop in Jerusalem. They consult power. They speak to Herod. And for a moment, the light disappears. Scripture tells us the star goes dark until they leave behind fear, calculation, and control. Only then does the star reappear. How often does that happen in our own lives? We want clarity before commitment. We want certainty before trust. We want guarantees before obedience. But God rarely works that way. The Epiphany reminds us that God does not reveal himself all at once. He reveals himself enough to take the next step. And when the Magi finally arrive, what do they find? Not a throne, not power, not answers to the great questions of the universe. They find a child, a fragile, ordinary, vulnerable child, dependent on human care, hidden in a modest home, far from the centers of influence and control. And yet, Scripture tells us, they were overwhelmed with joy, not because they understood everything, but because they encountered someone. That is the turning point of Epiphany. Christian faith is not built on explanation. It is built on encounter. The Magi do not analyze the child. They do not ask him questions. They kneel. They open their treasures. They adore. In the presence of God made flesh, inquiry gives way to reverence. This does not mean that questions disappear. It means they are held differently. Faith does not silence the mind. It humbles it. Faith teaches us that not everything meaningful can be measured, defined, or controlled. And that is difficult for us. We live in a world that values answers, speed, certainty, and efficiency. We want problems solved and mysteries resolved. But the deepest truths of life, love, suffering, forgiveness, grace, do not submit to quick explanations. Neither does God. The Epiphany teaches us that God chooses to be known not as a concept, but as a presence, not as a solution, but as a companion, not as an idea, but as Emmanuel, God with us. And that changes everything, because it means that faith is not about grasping God, but about allowing ourselves to be grasped by Him. It means living with a holy patience, trusting that what we cannot yet understand is still held in God's wisdom. The Magi return home by a different route, not just geographically, but spiritually. Once you encounter Christ, you cannot go back the same way you came. You may still have questions, you may still live with mystery, but you carry something new within you, the quiet certainty that God has drawn near. As we continue to celebrate the Epiphany, we are invited to become like the Magi, not people with all the answers, but people willing to follow the light, willing to journey, willing to kneel, willing to trust the mystery. And perhaps that is enough, because in the end, God does not ask us to understand everything. He asks us to come and see. Thank you for listening to Echoes from the Heart. If this reflection blessed you, consider sharing it with someone who might need a word of hope today. For Mass times, parish events, and upcoming programs, visit ihmwaynenj.org. God bless you, and may your week be filled with peace and grace.